Good morning, Year 5. We've got a change of scenery today. I'm recording in my kitchen. I've got my coffee, so there we go, that's back to normal, isn't it? Okay, looking forward to seeing lots of you what will be next week by now. I'm recording these in advance, so I get a little bit confused as to what the time actually is for you guys at home. But yeah, I think today might be Monday, and I will be seeing some of you next Monday and Tuesday, and some of you next Wednesday and Thursday. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys, even if it's only for the last week. The doctors have said I can leave my house, so I'm very excited. It will be the fourth time I've left my house in 3.5 months, so treat me kindly. I don't know how the outside world works anymore. Anyway, back to the story. So we're going to finish off the Demon Headmaster this week. And you might find some of the chapters are a little bit shorter than usual, but it fits in quite nicely so that it finishes on Friday, which is great. And then if you're coming back into school, I'm sure we'll be reading you something else. I don't know what it is yet, though. Better shush now and read the story, hadn't I? Okay, so chapter 11, Dinah the Spy. As Dinah swallowed her last mouthful of stew, she felt more lonely than she'd ever felt in her life before. All the other members of Splat were sitting together on their usual isolated table in the dining hall, but they had decided that it would seem suspicious if she sat with them, so she was next to Lucy on a table full of good, well-behaved pupils, all of them munching their way through the same sized platefuls of stew and watery cabbage and lumpy mashed potato. Chop, scrape, lift. Chop, scrape, lift went the knives and forks in regular rhythm. No one complained about the terrible food, no one asked to leave any, no one spoke at all, even Lucy was chewing stolidly. Her stomach fluttering nervously, Dinah reached out for her dish of rice pudding. As she did so, she slipped her other hand into her pocket, feeling the shape of the Mandy's mum's phone underneath the cover of her handkerchief. "Dinah, glass," said Rose's voice over her shoulder. Dinah froze, rigid. "Well," Rose snapped. "Well, what?" muttered Dinah guiltily. "Your knife and fork." Glancing at her empty plate, Dinah saw that she had not left the knife and fork had left the knife and fork lying untidily askew. Trying not to look too relieved, she twitched them straight so that they lay at the same neat angle as everyone else's. Then she ate her rice pudding quickly, feeling with every mouthful that she might choke with fright. The phone seemed to be making a gigantic bulge in her pocket visible to anyone. 10 minutes later, as if at a signal, everyone on her table stood up, ready to walk off to assembly. Lloyd, Harvey and the others were still finishing their puddings. As Dinah passed their table, she glanced quickly sideways. Not one of them looked at her, but each of them had a hand on the table, and momentarily they had all crossed their fingers. Even Lloyd. Slightly comforted, Dinah marched out of the dining room and into the hall and sat down beside Lucy, who gave her a cautious smile. "Hello," Dinah whispered. "How are things?" Lucy smiled again and shrugged. Then, greatly daring, she whispered back, "How are you getting on?" Good question. Dinah glanced round at them, at the children and teachers, all of whom would give her away if they knew what she had in her pocket. She grinned wryly. "I feel like Winston Smith." "Winston Smith?" whispered Lucy, puzzled. "He was a man who was spied on all the time in a book called 1984. "Oh," Lucy still looked bewildered. "Funny name for a book." "It means," Dinah started, but Lucy nudged her sharply. "Shh, here he comes." The headmaster was walking slowly up the middle of the hall, his long gown swirling and his head erect. He looked neither to the right nor to the left, but as he passed, all fidgeting stopped. Children sat up straighter in their chairs and faced the front. While he climbed the steps of the stage, the men teachers pulled their ties smooth and the women patted their hair. "Good afternoon, school," he said. "Good afternoon, sir," replied everyone, voices perfectly together. He looked gravely down on the rows of heads in front of him and reached up to take off his glasses. Dinah felt a sudden spurt of revulsion at the thought of letting herself be hypnotised again, but there was nothing she could do. It had to happen if the plan was to succeed. Her finger, in her blazer pocket, twitched once, turning the phone on to catch the sound as the headmaster went on speaking. "I'm pleased to learn that you have all been working very hard this morning. You've done very well, but now you must be weary and sleepy." Crossing her fingers hard in her pockets, Dinah shut her eyes and felt the heavy, inexorable tide of sleep start to wash over her. She was already unconscious when the headmaster gave his first orders, so she never quite knew what happened next. She was not aware of the headmaster's steady voice, nor of her own repeating what they were all told to repeat. She could not even feel the shape of the phone clutched tightly in her fingers inside her pocket. "Right," said the headmaster suddenly. "Now move to the groups I divided you into yesterday and prepare to receive instructions." Their eyes opened but glazed. 200 children rose to their feet completely silently, except for the shuffling of chairs, and started to move along the rows like robots, rearranging themselves into 6 groups in different parts of the hall. Dinah's feet took her mechanically up onto the stage. As she walked across it, she passed the headmaster. But although her eyes passed over his face, she was not aware of the irritable way it twitched. "Dinah Glass, stop!" Obediently, she stood to attention. "You look slovenly. Take your hand out of your pocket at once." Without hesitation, she drew out her hand, still tightly clutching the phone. The headmaster had begun to turn away, but out of the corner of his eye he caught sight of it, and he whirled back. "Give me what you have in your hand." Her face blank and calm, Dinah held out the phone, and he took it from her. For a moment or two he turned it over thoughtfully in his hands. "Well, well," he said softly, "so that's the way the wind blows, is it? I can see I shall have to deal with you at once and not leave it until next week." Briefly his fingers moved, pressing buttons. Then he said in a louder voice, "Mr. Venables, come here." Automatically Mr. Venables marched up to the stage, and, with an expression of careful calculation on his face, the headmaster began to whisper in his ear. When Dinah opened her eyes again, blinking, she had a second of complete distracted panic. She was not quite sure where she was. Somehow she'd expected to be somewhere else. Then gradually the pieces of the room swam into place, and she realised that she was sitting in her own classroom. It was totally empty, except for Mr. Venables, who was at his desk facing her. "Good afternoon, Dinah," he said briskly. She blinked again. What am I doing here?" "You are here because I have something to say to you. Come up to my desk." Still dazed, she stood up and walked towards him. It was only when she was standing beside the desk that she noticed what was lying on top of it. 3 sheets of paper covered with sums worked in her own tiny figures. Very difficult sums. She was too controlled to catch her breath, but her face became completely wooden. Mr. Venables tapped the papers with one finger. "You did these sums, didn't you?" "They were Harvey's sums, not mine," Dinah said carefully. Mr. Venables gave an impatient sigh. "There was never any chance that Harvey could do them. They were set to see if you would do them to help him. If you could do them, and he will be punished for letting you help him, unless—" "But that's not fair," Dinah broke in. "He would have been punished if they weren't done, and now he's going to be punished because they are done. He never had any chance." "Fairness is an illusion designed to create disorder," Mr. Venables said calmly. "Besides, I didn't say that he would be punished, only that he would be punished unless you decide to help him by cooperating." Dinah stood stubborn and silent. Mr. Venables looked at her. "You're a clever girl, Dinah. How much you may have tried to hide it, you can see I have no choice." "What do you want me to do?" she asked stiffly. Briskly, Mr. Venables began to explain, and Dinah stared at him, completely amazed. She walked home alone in a dream, so wrapped up in what she was thinking that she didn't see anything around her. When she pushed open the kitchen door, Mrs. Hunter smiled at her. "The others are all in the playroom. They wondered what had happened to you." "The others?" Dinah said, still vague. Mrs. Hunter looked at her. "Are you all right, dear?" "What? Oh, yes." Suddenly Dinah remembered what was supposed to be happening. She slid her fingers into her pocket and felt the solid shape of the old phone. I just walked home rather slowly, that's all." "Do you want something to eat?" No, thanks. I better go and talk to them." As she reached the playroom door, a voice from inside said, "The man who can keep order can rule the world." For one moment, she couldn't quite drag the right reply out of her memory. Then it came. "But the man who can bear disorder is truly free." Ingrid wrenched open the door excitedly. "Hello, Brains, what happened?" "Hey, you look terrible." Silently, Dinah walked in and put the phone down on the table. Mandy touched her hand gently. "What's the matter? Did you get caught?" "No, I don't know." "You don't know?" Lloyd spluttered. "Christmas puddings, don't be silly, you must know." "No, she mustn't," Ian said. "She's been hypnotised, remember? Let's listen to the recording." Dinah nodded. Best to get that over first. Then she could talk properly. Ian reached for the phone and started checking it. Then he frowned and checked again. "There's nothing here," he said. "I can't find any sounds at all." Lloyd looked at Dinah. "You didn't switch it on," he said accusingly. "You forgot." "No, I didn't. I remember doing it." Dinah frowned. "I don't remember anything after that, but I definitely switched it on." "Perhaps it didn't pick up anything," Mandy said soothingly. "It was in her pocket after all." Lloyd looked stubborn. "I think she mucked it up." Oh, leave her alone, Harvey thumped him. You're always getting at her, Lloyd. Look, you've upset her. No, Dinah murmured. No, it's not that. I don't know why the recording didn't work, but something else happened. Suddenly they were all looking at her curiously. Come on, Ingrid urged. Don't spin it out. Tell us. Dinah took a deep breath. Why, she said quietly, didn't anyone tell me that the school was going to be on the Eddie Hare show next week in the Great School Quiz? Why, indeed. We'll find out tomorrow. Bye-bye, Year 5.